Let's talk about Life is Strange Before the Storm. Only the first chapter's come out, and I'm not going to be reviewing it, I'm going to be analyzing it. Because it's not yet a full game, we're going to be talking mostly about what-ifs and some basic technical issues, rather than trying to analyze the game in detail. You can't fight a memory. The original Life is Strange has been enshrined in people's minds. The flaws have been forgotten or exaggerated, and the merits have been exaggerated or forgotten. The original game was extremely flawed and mediocre, but the point of this kind of game isn't whether it is a masterpiece or a disaster, it's whether it can connect. The original Life is Strange had a first chapter so bad that I watched all of my friends stop playing. It didn't start connecting with people until the second chapter. So, when I analyze this game based solely on the first chapter, I have to take into account that if I analyzed the original Life is Strange solely on the first chapter, it would have sounded stunningly negative. With that in mind, this is going to sound stunningly negative. It's made a lot worse by the fact that we are analyzing something. We're cutting it apart. We're showing the guts and how it's stitched together. And that's always going to make something sound worse than it is, because you're seeing how the sausage is made. If this game connects with you, that's great. I don't want you to feel like I am telling you can't enjoy this game because it's flawed. I love flawed games, or I wouldn't be analyzing them. I think that there is a lot to learn from this game, especially if it connects with you. And if it doesn't connect with you, maybe think about why it does connect with the people it connects with, because that's also something that's very valuable to understand. That said, we're going to have a pretty negative first couple of minutes here, and I hope that doesn't throw you off. The most obvious problem with this game is the core concept. It appears to be a strict prequel. That's a very tight space to work in, and more importantly, it gives us two huge handicaps. The first is, Chloe can't have a character arc. Not unless it's cyclic. The second is, Chloe can't have a power. Now, the first is an obvious problem, but the second one, why does it matter if Chloe doesn't have a power? Plenty of adventure games have people without powers, but the power in Life is Strange represents the character. Max's power of photography wasn't there to give her cool puzzles. In fact, they really didn't understand how to use them in puzzles at all. Instead, it was there to represent her personality. Her character growth was represented by her growth of power. Her changing powers represented her changing personality. Chloe won't be able to do that. That's really going to be a problem. Well, hopefully they'll pull it out in the next couple of episodes, but we're going to talk about the powers I would have liked to see, the things I would have liked to see, sort of as an alternate universe if they didn't have to stick to canon, or if they could roll it back at the end. We're going to get to that later, though. For now, let's move on to another rather serious problem. The art direction is bad. It doesn't fit the IP at all. The original game had very weak 3D modeling. There were a couple of things it was good at, but for the most part, it was like, there are a couple of bodies, there are a couple of faces, there are a couple of walls, there are a couple of props. And what makes them pop and makes them unique is the gorgeous painted textures. Similarly, the original game's animations were extremely limited, but what animations there were very lifelike, especially in the faces. This game apparently decided that wasn't how it was going to work. It uses these crisp, flat textures. It goes for higher polygons, more polygons, more details, and it tries to make the characters unique by twisting and pulling their faces into weird plastic masks. The animations, there's a wider variety, but they're all mechanical and robotic. Especially the faces, they just stare blankly. It's a very strange choice, because the greatest strength of the original game is arguably those lifelike faces with the beautiful texture work. I understand that budgets and manpower are a constraint, but it seems very strange that the greatest strength of the original game was completely ignored by the follow-up. I really wonder what happened, because I can't imagine they got this much wrong on accident. It's something that people who play the original game notice right away, so you can't just have forgotten about it when you're making the sequel. They had to decide not to do those things and to instead make these weird cartoon plastic masks. I don't know. Well, those are rather negative, but there are things I like about this game. The scenario writing is actually very good. The implementation is often quite uneven, but the fundamental scenarios are very well thought out and serve their purpose very well. For example, this opening scenario. Chloe goes and bluffs her way past a guard to get to a secret concert. She can't join the party proper, but she can climb some stairs and enjoy it from above. Then there's danger, a friend shows up, she proves herself, and now she's in the party with her friend. This is very well thought out. We see who Chloe is, we see what she wants, we see who she has to be with to get what she wants, and it also pulls the player in at the same time. The player, like Chloe, is watching from above. And like Chloe, the player could have been pulled into the game by Rachel Amber. The implementation isn't quite there, unfortunately, because the characters, their faces are masks, and it's a little hard to get close-ups to actually speak. So you can't just show close-ups of Rachel Amber and let the player feel that Rachel Amber is now in control of their experience. Instead, you have to have Chloe monologue. And wow, she talks to herself more than Max. They fill every possible space with her talking to herself because the faces can't emote. Despite that, I think that this game's scenario writing is actually better than the original game's. In the original game, the opening chapter's first scenario was good, but it fell apart after that. The experience held together because of good voice acting and good art, but the scenarios were bad, and I mean, they were bad enough to drive people away. Like, someone gets their door locked from the outside, and there's a lady sitting on some steps, and you can't walk past her for some reason, so you do a fetch quest that leads to a fetch quest that leads to a fetch quest that leads to a fetch quest. It's like awful scenarios. This game is the opposite. It has good scenarios throughout, but the voice acting is iffy and the visuals are not very good. So you end up with an interesting situation, and I'm sort of hoping that they'll keep the strong scenario writing in the next couple of chapters, but up their game visually and in terms of voice acting. Here's another one that holds together really well. The day after their outing, Chloe and Rachel meet up, and they have to talk about the Tempest. The two lovers in the Tempest. They just met, so is it hormones, or is it true love? That perfectly mirrors Chloe's own questions right now in a way that works very well and fits very smoothly into the narrative. It's a great scenario. Another great scenario is the scene where they stumble into this trash yard and they have their big fight, and then Chloe throws a tantrum. This scenario is also perfectly suited to the story and fits the flow of the story and the characters very well. The implementation sometimes leaves a little bit to be desired, but the fundamental scenario is rock solid, and it's an excellent idea. It's also the time when Chloe's graffitiing could have turned into something magical. They didn't go that way, which was a real shame in my eyes, but it was a really well thought out scenario. To tell the truth, I think that Chloe's graffiti is just a great idea in general. It makes for a really excellent contrast with Max's powers. Max records the world and is very careful about messing with it. Chloe messes with the world and never wants to record it. So that contrast is wonderful, and graffiti is easily as powerful as photography. It could have made an excellent basis for a power. I don't think we're going to see any Chloe-based powers. I think that they are very concerned about fitting into canon. I think we're going to see some weak Rachel powers, but I would have loved to see Chloe's graffiti really, really come into play and really make some fun puzzles that reflect Chloe's personality. Let me pitch you a few alternate ideas about the kinds of powers that Chloe could have had using her graffiti, and where those might have led. Let's presume that her graffiti changes people and makes them always have been different. Well, right now her life is in a really bad place, and she misses her only friend. So she remakes someone in the image of Max. But she can't change the foundation that it's built on, so although Rachel Amber becomes a goddess, she still remains at heart what she was when she began, which was a desperate junkie that was willing to sleep with a dangerous drug dealer just to get a hit. That drug dealer is now very confused as to why there is a goddess sleeping with him. Sounds like a kind of interesting idea. Why stop there? We could have her remake everybody. Rachel and Victoria were besties, but now Rachel has always been a goddess and Victoria's always been a bitch, and neither of them has anyone that understands them anymore. She makes Principal Wells a money grub. She makes Frank a drug dealer. She makes her mom perfect, and she makes David a demon. And when Rachel falls, not for Chloe, but for the perfect artist, Max, she makes it so that Max is not around and left. That sounds like a kind of interesting idea as well, and it fits relatively easily into a canon reset if you really need to do that. Both of those ideas work very well for allowing her power to express her personality and her character. She imprints the world with what she believes and what she thinks, and she finds out that, like a genie's curse, it never ends up quite the way she wanted it to. But you can also go another route. Maybe Chloe's not even at fault in the slightest. Same exact plot as the first chapter, but instead of Rachel Amber being already a goddess, she's just some sort of hanger-on of Victoria. She's just one of Victoria's flunkies. Instead of Chloe going and finding Rachel under the tree, Rachel returns to the junkyard to find Chloe asleep. She's about to wake Chloe up when she sees the graffiti, and the magic happens. Now Rachel remakes herself as a goddess and pulls Chloe down a self-destructive path that Chloe had barely set foot on. In that way, you could write it more concretely within canon, because you can still have the powers and stuff happening, but you don't have to worry about there needing to be some kind of explanation as to why Chloe doesn't have superpowers later. You can put that all onto Rachel. I don't think it's right for Rachel to have superpowers on her own, because then that would mean that everyone who meets Chloe has superpowers and Chloe never has any, which is kind of a strange situation. Either way, I can think of literally dozens of different ideas as to how this graffiti could work. That was only one. That was the idea that the graffiti could change people without Chloe realizing it. There are so many other options. Well, I'm not my theoretical Chloe. I can't change the world by doodling on the internet, and I doubt the devs care very much about my imaginary plans for a story that will never be told. As long as the story ends up connecting, I'll be happy. Right now, I don't know that it will, but if you'd asked me the same question after Chapter 1 of the original game, I would have given you the same answer. So I'll hope for the best, and I'll hope that it does connect. And obviously, I'm not really the target audience. I wasn't for the original game either, but I still hope that it will connect. That's the only thing that really matters in a game like this.